Let's talk about how we could use a mock object instead of having to write our own fake objects to change how we would do this unit test. And then we'll be done with this section of the module. So using a mock framework like MOQ or mock-Q, you can easily create mock versions of these interfaces that you can then use. So in the case here where we want to verify that when we get back an empty result from the invoice repository, that we do not call the employee repository, we would implement that something like this. First, we need to change our invoice repository to make it so it is a mock one. So we'll say this is a new mock of invoice repository. And likewise, we would like this to be a new mock of employee repository. And then we want to verify what this mock is going to do. So we'll say invoice repository dot setup. And we want to say that when the list invoices is called, we want that to return a new data table. Then we can do our service so that it takes in these things. With mock-Q, the actual object we want is under the .object property of our mock. So say .object. For both of those, we're going to go ahead and call this. And now instead of our assertion that we have this was called property, we don't actually have one of those on our mock object. Instead, we're going to say something like invoice repository dot verify, and we want to say such that dot list invoices, and then we'll say times dot exactly one time. And then we also want to verify in this case that the employee repository has a method called list employees dot, we want to say it was called times dot never, because we don't want it to have been called. We'll run the unit test, and here you see it was successful. So looking at this code, you can see it's doing pretty much the same thing we were doing with our fake objects here, except that you could imagine that we would end up writing a lot of these fake objects if we were doing this over and over again within our code. By using a mock framework like mock-Q, we were able to create these mock objects, specify the behavior we expected from them, then pass them into our system under test, in this case our extraction service, run our code, and then verify that the interactions with the collaborating objects, these two repositories, happened exactly the way we expected them to, with one call being made to the invoice repository, list invoices, and because of the result that it returned back, a data table with no rows, we were able to see that list employees was never called. And that behavior was this behavior we added here, as you recall. All right, so that's how you can use mock objects. Obviously, we can go into more detail on that in another course.